Hello everyone, this is lecture 1, part 2. Growth hormone GH or somatotropin is produced by somatotropic cells in anterior pituitary. It has a direct actions on metabolism. It increases the blood levels of fatty acid, encourages use of fatty acid for fuel, and also protein synthesis. It decreases the rate of glucose uptake and metabolism by converting glucose so that having glycogen breakdown and glucose released to blood. So which is really anti-insulin effect. So people who actually take growth hormone, they lose fat and they look good and their muscle grows. So there are lots of energy in the blood to make cells to grow and make a muscle to get bigger. Indirect actions on growth hormone is that it mediate through insulin-like growth factors in the liver, and which is important to uptake of nutrients to DNA and proteins, and then also formation of collagen and deposition of bone matrix. This is how kids grow. Major targets are bones and skeletal muscles. And growth hormone release, as we discussed, is regulated by hypothalamic hormone, which is GHRH and GHIH. And also ghrelin, which is hunger hormone, also stimulates growth hormone release. As you see this slide, blood glucose level also triggers GHRH and GHIH in hypothalamus, so that the anterior pituitary can release growth hormone. And in the liver, it works through IGF, and then target cells are skeletal and muscular muscle to produce more glucose in the blood by having more carbohydrate and also fat breakdown, and also more amino acid uptake, so more protein can be made, such as muscle, and so that cell growth and cell mitosis occurs. Homeostatic imbalance of growth hormone can be either hypersecretion in children, result in giantism, in adults result in acromegaly, and hyposecretion in children result in pituitary dwarfism. Thyroid gland has two lateral lobes connected by median mass called isthmus, composed of follicles that produce glycoprotein, thyroglobulin, and basically colloid are thyroglobulin plus iodine, and that they fills the lumen of follicles you saw in a slide at the lab is a precursor of thyroid hormone. And also they have a parafollicular cells produce the hormone called calcitonin, which is basically parafollicular cells also can be called C cells, and they are antagonistic hormone to PTH, which is the basically increased calcium concentration in the blood. This calcitonin decreases those by putting those extra calcium from the blood into the bone. At higher than normal doses, it also inhibits the osteoclast activity and release of calcium from bone matrix, and that is basically from the PTH action. Okay. This one shows you no thyroid stimulating hormone produced by thyrotropic cell of anterior pituitary stimulate the normal development and secretory activity of thyroid, and they are released and triggered by TRH from hypothalamus, and also inhibited by rising blood levels of thyroid hormone that acts on pituitary and hypothalamus. As you see that thyroid hormone is a major metabolic hormone. It increases the metabolic rate and heat production, and also it regulates the tissue growth and development, and also development of skeletal and nervous system as well. And it also maintains the blood pressure, and it also affects the reproductive capabilities as well. As you see this Increased level of T3, T4 in the blood can negatively feedback release of TSH from anterior pituitary and also release of TRH by hypothalamus. And however, if you have homeostatic imbalance of TH, hyposecretion in others creates the myxedema, and it also creates the goiter if due to the lack of iodine. Hyposecretion in infants creates the creatism, and hypersecretion in the adult creates the Graves' disease. Thyroid hormone actually are two related compounds of T4 thyroxine has a two tyrosine molecules plus 4 bound iodine atoms. T3 triiodothyronine, which has a 2 tyrosines and 3 bound iodine atoms. They basically affects cell metabolism in all of your all the cells in your body, and the synthesis of this thyroid hormone is shown in this slide. Thyroid gland stores hormone extracellularly. We saw this in the slide at the lab. And thyroglobulin synthesized and discharged into follicle lumen, and iodine actively taken into cell from the blood and released into the lumen, where they meet together and creates the T3, T4. This is called colloid, and they are also taken up by the cell and then combined with the lysosome, and then later T3, T4 are released and diffused into the blood stream, where now it can be a circulating thyroid hormone. However, they are normally bound to thyroxine binding globulin TBG, and they are normally T3 is a lot more active than T4, and this is the sort of simplified diagram of mine of the previous slide. All right, parathyroid gland has a 4 of this tiny gland embedded in posterior aspect of the thyroid. They contain, they normally secretes the PTH and parathyroid hormone, and then it is the most important hormone in calcium homeostasis. Parathyroid hormone functions by stimulating the osteoclast to digest the bone matrix and release calcium to blood. And also it enhances reabsorption of calcium and secretion of phosphate by kidneys. It also promotes activation of vitamin D by kidneys and increased absorption of calcium by intestinal mucosa. Negative feedback control is done by rising calcium in the blood to inhibit the PTH release. Homeostatic imbalance of PTH normally created by hyperparathyroidism due to the tumor sometimes, and also bone can be softened and deformed, and elevated calcium depresses the nervous system, also contributes to formation of kidney stone as well. Hypoparathyroidism following glandular tumor and also having some dietary magnesium deficiency can result in tetany or respiratory paralysis, and it can also result in a death. Adrenal gland are paired and pyramid-shaped organs atop kidneys. Structurally and functionally are two glands in a one, like a pituitary anterior and posterior. One is nervous origin, the other is glandular. So adrenal medulla is a nervous tissue, and it is a part of sympathetic nervous system. Adrenal cortex has 3 layers of, as you see here, glandular tissue that synthesizes and secretes the different types of corticosteroid. So if you look at this cortex, there are 3 layers, as you've seen, and zona glomerulosa is the outer layer which secretes the mineralocorticoids. Zona fasciculata secretes the glucocorticoids. Zona reticularis secretes the gonatocorticoids. And Mineralocorticoids regulate electrolyte, especially sodium and potassium ions in extracellular fluid, and it is very important of sodium ion and affects extracellular fluid volume and blood pressure, and also they are very important for maintaining potassium ion concentration. Aldosterone is the most important mineralocorticoid, and it stimulates reabsorption and water retention by kidney, and also it eliminates the potassium ion. Adrenal medulla, the chromatin cells synthesize epinephrine and then norepinephrine. It affects vasoconstriction, increase the heart rate, and increase the blood glucose levels, and blood diverted to brain and heart and skeletal muscle. And epinephrine stimulates the metabolic activities and bronchial dilation and blood flow to skeletal muscles and the heart. Norepinephrine also has a similar effects, and also especially vasoconstriction and influence the blood pressure, as we learn in AMP1 in the nervous system. If you have too much hypersecretion of epinephrine, norepinephrine, and it will increase the metabolic rate and also increase the blood glucose level, and also your heart rate will raise and palpitation may occur. Hypertension and also intense nervousness and swelling can also result as well. Hyposecretion of epinephrine, norepinephrine is not very much problematic. And this shows you the stress such as fever, anger, cold, low sugar, and changing in daily rhythms. All those irregular challenges can stimulate the neurons in hypothalamus to release CRH, and CRH will challenge anterior pituitary to secrete ACTH, and then adrenal ACTH will go to adrenal cortex to secrete the cortisol, and basically it gives the stress response for increasing more fats break down into the blood, more glucose are made, gluconeogenesis, and also muscle breakdown, so that what you want is keeping high glucose level to produce immediately lots amount of ATP. And this slide shows you short-term and long-term prolonged stress can cause different phenomena. Glucocorticoid, as you see, they keep blood glucose levels relatively constant, and also cortisol released in response to CRH or ACTH. They are normally prime metabolic effects is gluconeogenesis, so that again you want to have a glucose from fats, not only fats but also proteins as well, so that having more glucose in the blood and fatty acid and amino acid, one can actually save the brain so that you can keep on going to deal with those stress. And also so long-term effects of this mineralocorticoid and then glucocorticoids can be basically retain of sodium and water by kidney, so that blood volume and blood pressure can rise, and also breakdown of your proteins, creating that also that you are also losing immune system function. So short-term and long-term effects are a little bit different. However, in the end, that your metabolism is way up to try to deal with this stress. So as you see, that prolonged stress can really break down your body, such as you're breaking down all the energy storage of the fat, and also your building material of muscle. Okay, so aldosterone release triggered by decreasing blood volume and also blood pressure, and also can increase the blood levels of potassium level. So normally aldosterone secretion is coupled with renin and angiotensin aldosterone together, and dropping blood pressure basically stimulate the kidney to release the renin from the kidney, and then it triggers formation of angiotensin 2 in the blood, and this is the potent stimulator of aldosterone release. And also plasma concentration of potassium level rises, and they directly affects glomerular cells of adrenal gland to release aldosterone. And ACTH causes small increase of aldosterone during the stress, and also in response to high blood pressure due to secreted by heart, that ANP, which is the atrial natriuretic peptide, blocks the renin and aldosterone secretion to decrease the blood pressure. And in the end, hypertension and edema can occur if you have too much of excess amount of sodium concentration. Therefore, homeostatic imbalance of aldosterone can be a very dangerous rising blood pressure. And this shows you sort of effects of the stress. Of course, we just talked about CRH, the stress response to increase the fat breakdown and a new glucose formation, and also protein breaks down. And then same effects occurs through also thyroid releasing hormone through thyroid stimulating hormone, so that T3 T4 circulating T3 to T4 will amplify stress hormone cortisol effects. And not only that, but also growth hormone also works together in the end. Metabolic protein catabolism and gluconeogenesis and lipolysis can be triggered by that, so that in the end you can temporarily have a high glucose level in the blood for the production of ATP to deal with the stress. And so this endocrine aspect of the dealing with the stress. However, in the case of sympathetic nervous system, as you see, the adrenal medulla will secrete the epinephrine and norepinephrine, and immediate response can be alarm reaction. So that's the fight and flight response. As you see that your brain is alert, blood vessel constrict, heart rate goes up, pupil dilate, so glycogen is converted into blood glucose level, so ATP is increased, so you can fight longer and harder. So this is the first reaction. And so right side of this equation is the resistance reaction, which is the long-term stress, which is the endocrine. Left side of the equation is the immediate neural nervous system working together. And then when bodies keep on trying to break this all the sources of energy, which is glucose and glycogen breakdown, and then new glucose formation, and then fat breaks down, and then protein breaks down, and in the end you reach the exhaustion, and then immune system goes down, creating ulcer, hypertension, rheumatoid arthritis, asthma, etc. And all these things, of course, here aldosterone has effects of hypertension, and then in the end your body will exhaust, and then disease occurs, and then death occurs. And this slide shows you in terms of aldosterone how basically it works. Normally triggering mechanism is the dehydration, hyponatremia, hemorrhage, and these occurs due to sweating and vomiting and diarrhea, and so the blood volume goes down, therefore blood pressure goes down. Kidney will sense that pressure going down, and it will trigger renin release, and renin will convert angiotensinogen, which is the plasma protein always in the blood, which is inactive, will convert it into angiotensin 1, which is the active form, which in circulation goes to the lung, where the angiotensin converting enzyme converts those angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. Now it becomes active hormone, and it affects in the two. One, blood vessel constriction, so that blood pressure can be going up, and then it through the adrenal cortex secretes the aldosterone so that it can work on the kidney to retain those sodiums, and then secretes the potassium, and therefore through this blood volume can go up, so it can restore blood pressure. Gonadotropins are sex hormones. As you see, the most weak androgens, so male sex hormone are converted into testosterone in tissue cells, and some to estrogen. So many contribute to the onset of puberty, and then it gives a secondary sex characteristic and sex drive in woman. Estrogens in postmenopausal woman also made by in that route. Okay, so as you see this, until the puberty, hypothalamus is not going to release gonadotropin releasing hormone, but at puberty, GnRH is released, and then GnRH will trigger gonadotropes at the anterior pituitary to secrete FSH and LH, which is a target endocrine organ. In the case of female, it goes to the ovary, and then FSH will work on making those follicles get bigger every 28 days. So it initiates the oogenesis, and also it secretes the estrogen as the eggs getting bigger. And in the case of male, it targets the testis, and where the receptor is situated in seminiferous tubules, where it now triggers sperm production. In the case of LH in the case of female at the ovary, it stimulates the egg to be kicked out from the ovary to follicular tubule. So it's ovulation, stimulate the ovulation, and also LH will also stimulate the estrogen and progesterone production. And also LH in the case of male, in interstitial cells of the testis, it makes a testosterone production. And also as FSH production decrease, that's due to the inhibin secretion in the case of male and female, and also relaxin in the case of female is a dilation of the uterus when female need to deliver a baby. Okay, so in the end, these guys regulate the reproductive cycle and also oogenesis and maintain pregnancy and prepare lactation and also promote secondary sex characteristics. Okay, prolactin. Prolactin secretion is due to the either different levels of estrogen level, and they will trigger hypothalamus to secrete either PIH or PRH. PRH, same name is dopamine. And these guys will now go to anterior pituitary to secrete the prolactin. And then prolactin is sort of go to bosom to secrete the milk production. However, in order to do that, you have permissive hormone has to be there. First of all, estrogen, progesterone, insulin, thyroid hormone, growth hormone, glucocorticoid levels has to be up during the pregnancy to make this cycle to go full out. So even though that by the time, as you know, that some of you are mother and have a baby that you're about to give your milk to the baby, but however, unless you have touch receptors triggering suckling reflex through hypothalamus, and also suckling actually gives through the nerve impulses to the brain, then milk production is not going to be sustained. So that if you want to give your own milk to baby, and you have to have your baby to actually give you suckling response by triggering the hypothalamus neurons for nerve impulses. All right, so and then that complete the anterior pituitary hormones, and now posterior pituitary hormones. As you see that those neurons in hypothalamus will synthesize oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone, and then they are going to travel down through the axon and release at the axon terminal on posterior pituitary. So here, infant suckling and also distension of the cervix during the water breakdown, and then also the baby's head is actually pushing the muscles around the cervix. Now posterior pituitary will secrete the oxytocin, and then more smooth muscle contraction and more oxytocin, more. So it's a positive feedback response. This is the emergency situation for delivery. And after delivery, it is very important that you have oxytocin to actually be there for a while, so that you can squeeze the milk gland for the babies to drink the milk, and also repair by shrinking your cervix so that the blood vessels do not lose enough blood after the delivery. So it's sort of repair function. Okay, and another hormone by posterior pituitary is the antidiuretic hormone. And the trigger is when blood volume goes down, and so that blood pressure goes down due to hemorrhage, excessive sweating, or excessive vomit, excessive diarrhea. As you see that by losing the water, interstitial water, you are increasing osmotic pressure, so more salt and less water, so the osmoreceptors in hypothalamus actually are innervated, and then posterior pituitary will secrete antidiuretic hormone. And also here, and other stresses in hypothalamus, such as pain, stress, trauma, anxiety, and smoking, and also taking those drugs, they all work hypothalamus powerfully, so that antidiuretic hormone can be released from posterior pituitary. And as you see that it has three targets. First, kidney tubules. Make sure that it gets all the water from the pre-urine, so that your urine will be concentrated by having less water loss. And also blood vessel will be squeezed, so that temporarily blood pressure will go up. And also sweat gland will be sort of closed down, so that you have less sweat, so that you are minimizing water loss. By doing so, in the end, blood volume goes up, blood pressure goes up, and then also osmotic pressure goes down. So this will actually correct the osmotic pressure, which was high. Now it can be sort of reached to the homeostatic level. And as you see this, when you drink a lot of alcohol, next day you are dehydrated. Why? Because you had to go to bathroom all the time, so using all the water, and so that these neurons in hypothalamus are all shrunk up because it's just dehydrated. This is why you have a hangover. Okay? All right, another last one we have to talk about is pineal gland. This small gland hanging from the roof of the ventricle. And as you see that it secretes the melatonin, which is derived from the one of the serotonin, and as you see this, melatonin is very important in terms of day and night cycle, and also it is very important for controlling your body temperature and sleep and appetite between those day and night cycle, and also it controls the antioxidants and detoxification of molecules in the cell. All right, last one is pancreas. Secretes the two antagonistic hormone. One is insulin when blood sugar level is up, so the insulin can convert glucose to glycogen. So in the end, it will convert it into the fat. So it's a fat hormone. Of course, you are lowering circulating blood glucose level down. However, you are storing the fat. In the case of after the meal, you are hungry, then you are getting all the glycogen from the storage to glucose, so that blood glucose level can be raised by glycogen from the pancreas. So this is the part 2 of endocrine system.